Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Cash Flow, How to Optimize Working Capital for Your Women-Owned Business. My name is Michelle Eisenberg, and I'm a program assistant at the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the Nasdaq Center is a nonprofit that is building a better path for entrepreneurs worldwide by improving inclusion, access, and knowledge in entrepreneurship. So as you will see in the chat in a moment, the Nasdaq Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races, industries, and geographies. So definitely make sure to check out those links and resources in the chat. And then just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. First, let us know where you're dialing in from in the chat. And second, we're going to open up for live Q&A at the end of the event. So please make sure to submit your questions for us in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation, and we will try our best to get to all of them. Awesome. India, Virginia, Sacramento, Arizona, New Jersey, California, New York, Winnipeg, Spain, Chicago. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for dialing in. And of course, none of what we do could be possible at the center without all of the amazing support from our sponsors, including Nasdaq, Lehigh University, Bank of the West, Airbnb, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, Woodruff Sawyer, Microsoft Entrepreneurship for Positive Impact, BPM, and HubSpot for Startups. We are humbled by their contributions and hope you are grateful too. And so before we get started, I'm going to launch a quick poll or two to step back and see how everyone's doing today. And we use this information to guide our future development of programming. So this first one is going to ask, how are you feeling? Fearful, anxious, surviving, or optimistic? Give everyone a few moments to respond here. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to end this poll, share the results. All right. Looks like optimism is in the lead, but we do have some feelings of surviving and anxiety. So hopefully some of what we talk about will help with those feelings. So I'm going to stop sharing this poll and launch the second poll. What is keeping you up at night? This one tells us a little bit more about your current entrepreneurial needs. So I'll give everyone a few more moments to respond here. Awesome. Thank you for participating. I'm going to go ahead and end this poll, share the results. Looks like finance is in the lead, sales and marketing coming up behind, but all across the board. So we will take this into account for our future programming. Awesome. I'm going to stop sharing this poll. And without any further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our moderator, Paloma Vision, Women Entrepreneur Segment Leader and VP at Bank of the West.
Thank you.
Paloma.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and good morning to everyone. As Michelle said, my name is Paloma Vision, and I work at Bank of the West. Bank of the West has recently joined BMO, making us the 5th largest commercial bank in North America and expanding our footprint from 19 to 32 states. The combined organization offers everything from personal and business banking, commercial banking, wealth management, and capital markets advisory. And at BMO, our mission is to boldly grow the good in business and in life. I have the privilege to lead our Women Entrepreneurs segment here at Bank of the West, where I get to put together strategies and solutions to help women entrepreneurs as they build and grow their businesses. And I'm so excited to be here with you all today to celebrate Women's History Month, which started yesterday. And our focus for the month is really around financial wellness, and specifically today on cash flow. Before we get to our panel, in addition to the valuable information you're going to hear from our awesome panelists, we have a variety of resources for you to check out after this call. First of all, our Means and Matters Women in Business page. There is some great articles, events, other different places you can connect to CDFIs. So I'd highly suggest you check that out. And especially, I was happy to see people are optimistic. But check out our new article from our chief economist on how to prepare your business for potentially what's coming with a recession. I think it's really important to stay on top of those things. And I think the topic today will also be really helpful. In addition to that, we have 2 exciting specialized programs coming up for women entrepreneurs. We, first of all, have our Summer Milestone Makers program with the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center, which Bank of the West is sponsoring. The summer cohort is actually going to be a group of women entrepreneurs who are solving for any of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So there's an area on the website to express interest in that upcoming program. And in addition, BMO and 1871 have their next edition of their Women in FinTech program. The application period is going to open on March 20th, and you'll see that in a future Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center newsletter. But I think it's incredible to share. They've had 23 total companies go through that program. Those companies have gone on to create 163 jobs and have raised a total of $29 million of investment. So 2 great programs to look forward to this summer. And following this event, we've been working to gather expertise from experts outside of this event, as well as the insights you're going to hear today, to create a cash flow workbook. So expect to see that in the next few days. We're really excited to have that as a follow-up for all of you. But without further delay, I'm so excited to be joined by our panelists today. First off, we have Melanie Velasquez, Principal Relationship Manager for Bank of the West, based in our New Mexico office. And I have to share, a former woman entrepreneur. Roxanne Burns, who heads up our SBA program and specialty lending at Bank of the West, and John Blair, founder of Free to Grow CFO, also an entrepreneur. Welcome, all 3 of you.
Thank you.
Great. So before we get started, I wanted to give you all a moment to share a little bit more about yourselves. Melanie, if you could start.
Yes, well, thank you again. And it's nice to be back and presenting and speaking to the group. Again, I'm Melanie Velasquez. I am from Albuquerque, New Mexico, a native of Albuquerque. I have a privilege to manage and work with a diverse portfolio of clients. And in New Mexico, we are primarily made up of small to medium-sized businesses. So we start with a lot of companies that are just starting out, to our 3rd, 4th generation companies, all the way to our succession and exit strategies. And it's just been an honor to work with Bank of the West, now with BMO, and be able to provide services and really create a relationship with our clients.
Great. Rox.
Well, as Paloma shared, I have been in SBA lending most of my career. And my particular passion is financial literacy, financial management literacy. So I love this topic.
Awesome. And I will tell you, if you haven't seen Rox before, especially when she helped many of us out during PPP, she's here to help you. So make sure you've got lots of questions for both her, Melanie, and John. And John, love to have you introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, I'm John Blair. I'm the founder of Free to Grow CFO. I'm originally from Southern California and now reside in Austin, Texas. Before starting Free to Grow CFO, I was the founding team member of a company called Guardian Bikes, which is a direct-to-consumer kids bike brand selling the safest kids bike. You may have seen us on Shark Tank. We partnered with Mark Cuban. I led the company as COO and CFO for a number of years, and then started Free to Grow CFO about a year ago to help founders of growing businesses scale with confidence. And so really happy to be here and talk about something I'm super passionate about, which is optimizing cash flow.
Great. So I wanted to make sure we were all kind of grounded, thinking about cash flow in the same way. So I wanted to invite John to start with a bit of a primer on cash flow for the whole group, so we all start on the same page. So John, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Let's see here. Once the slide deck gets up, we'll get going. Okay, perfect. All right. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk us through the basics of cash flow drivers, what I call cash flow drivers 101. So scaling a business is one of the most challenging journeys that you're going to embark on as an entrepreneur. Along the way, you're going to need to manage and leverage things like vision and people, processes, and data. But however, no matter how well you manage those things, if you become constrained by insufficient cash flow, little else matters. So what I'm going to walk you through is the fundamentals of how to measure your cash flow and to take that newfound ability to proactively Optimize your cash flow so you'll never find yourself short of cash when your growing business needs it the most. So go ahead and take us to the next slide here. In its simplest form, yeah, go ahead and one more click. Perfect. So in its simplest form, cash flow is driven by two main factors: profitability and the cash conversion cycle. Given how familiar founders tend to be with the drivers of profitability, I'm going to focus really quick on the lesser understood and arguably more important driver of cash flow, which is the cash conversion cycle. What is the cash conversion cycle? It's the number of days that it takes for a company to convert $1 of purchase inventory into $1 of cash received from sales. The typical formula for cash conversion cycle is laden with accounting jargon, so I like to simplify the terminology as follows. Can you click one more? Perfect. Cash conversion cycle is inventory days plus AR days minus AP days. So inventory days is the average number of days of inventory that you have on hand. AR is the average number of days that it takes to collect your receivables, and AP days is the average number of days that it takes to pay your suppliers. We can go to the next slide. So what does this tell you? It tells you that the lower your cash conversion cycle is, the healthier your cash flow will be, and vice versa. Why is that? It's because the longer it takes for your business to convert $1 of inventory, $1 of inventory purchase into $1 of cash received from sales, the longer your cash is sitting idle in one of three places. One, your cash is sitting on warehouse shelves, that's inventory days. Two, it's in your customers' bank accounts, that's AR days. And three, it's in your vendors' bank accounts, that's AP days. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So now that you have a basic understanding of the drivers of cash flow, it becomes easier to see that insufficient cash flow is driven by one of four things: insufficient profitability, excess inventory on hand, inventory days are too high, excess or slow turning receivables, AR days are too high, paying vendors too quickly, AP days are too low. So with that being said, as a fractional CFO, when I talk to founders about their cash flow, I'm always zeroing in on margins, fixed overhead, profitability, inventory days, AR days, and AP days. So there we go. There's our primer on cash flow.
Great. Thank you so much, John. I hope that really, grounded the conversation for everyone attending. So we heard what John's looking at, but, Rox, I'd love to hear from your perspective. How do you look at cash flow?
Yeah, so it's a similar thing. So the cash conversion cycle that John talked about is based on a balance sheet. So as a lender, if you don't have a balance sheet and you don't maintain a balance sheet and you don't do accrual basis of accounting, it's very difficult to get your mind wrapped around days inventory, days receivables, and days payables. So that's the first thing for me. It's really about, for me, I think especially when I'm thinking about working capital in a company that wants to grow or wants to, has an opportunity to take a big growth step, I really want to see that balance sheet. And I'm looking at exactly the same things you are. I'm looking at those cash conversion cycles and your profitability. It's liquidity. That's kind of another word that bankers use, but it all starts with that balance sheet for me. And it's probably the biggest gap that I see that limits you from accessing capital or the capital that you need.
Great. Thank you, Rox. And Melanie, when you're working with clients, how are you looking at their cash flow?
Very similar to what we've talked about. Balance sheet is extremely important, but I'll go a little step deeper. I always want to look at what my company management, what their experience in their field. Is it a goods or service that they're providing? That tells me a lot. Have they gone through different cyclical times? Have they gone through a pandemic before? Mm-hmm. Looking at that cash position, and do they really know their numbers? So yes, fundamentally, balance sheet is going to be extremely important, but I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into the story and really know, does my client understand their business model and these factors when looking at working capital?
Great. Thank you. So we heard kind of overall, you guys are all basically looking at the same picture, cash conversion cycle, the balance sheet. what is maybe your one most important piece of financial data you're looking at? Roxy, I'm going to start with you.
Well, repayment ability is a big thing for a lender. So your primary source of repayment ability is your cash flow from your business. And your net profit, or EBITDA, is another term that a lot of businesses look at. EBITDA is not cash. EBITDA is just profit until it's converted to cash. So, as a lender, you have to, when we make you a loan, you have to make your payment every month. I need to have reasonable assurance that you can generate the cash that you need to make that payment every month. And profitability is just part of that factor.
Great. Melanie, what about you?
Very similar to Rox as well. And I do look at the accounts receivable agings and also your payables, your accounts payables, because I'm going to be able to look to see and do a range of where are we sitting on a true cash position every month? And back to what John was saying, is it your vendors that are holding your cash, or are you being the bank and holding, and not being paid both your receivables longer? So I think those are important criteria. Again, primary source of repayment. And then the secondary source repayment. What is that secondary source that we look at as well?
Great. Thank you, Melanie. And John, I want to invite you. What's your kind of key financial data piece you're looking at?
So obviously I am looking at the aggregated cash conversion cycle and understanding the drivers underneath that. But in the space that my business operates, which is primarily the direct to consumer CPG space, the two things we're talking about the most are inventory planning and inventory management and return on advertising spend. Because when you're direct to consumer, all your sales tend to be driven by advertising spend. And that's tends to be the biggest driver of margins, which are the biggest driver of profitability typically. So I'm usually really zeroing in on inventory days and return on advertising spend.
Great. Thank you. So we started a little high level, but let's really dive into those drivers that impact your cash flow. We've been in a very interesting job market, and it's improving right now. I think we can kind of say, but we're coming out of 3 challenging years for business owners. How does staffing impact a business's cash flow, and are there ways to mitigate those risks? And Melanie, I'd love to start with you.
This is what I hear with all of my clients is there has been a struggle with labor and staffing shortages. We see it within our own organization as well. So we understand that is a driver that affects how our businesses are performing and being profitable as well. I think it's realizing where's your best return. Your people are valuable and can really be the drivers to create success, whether it's selling, marketing, promoting, or being really the advocate for your product. We've got people in sales, but we also have people on the back end who can help with those conversions of cash. Are they calling on those receivables? Do they understand what payables are coming through? So people, we can't get away from it. We've got great technology, great systems, but we have to work very efficiently. And I think we found that in the last 3 years, how to be a little bit more creative and flexible. You have to have a very strong team who has the same buy-in and understands the concept and what's the end goal for your business. So your people are crucial.
Great. John, what's your perspective on this?
I definitely have some overlap with Melanie. When I think about staffing from a CFO perspective, I always think about strategy. Does every position in the business have a clear connection to driving forward the business's strategy? Why do we hire people? We hire people to execute on the business's strategy. So we should never hire for a position if it doesn't directly tie back to the achievement of the strategic plan. And if we have a sound strategic plan, then hiring people to execute on it should theoretically drive improvements in profit and cash conversion cycle and ultimately cash flow. Another lens that I think I look at this through is, can we connect every person in the business to how it drives increased profit? And does every person know their unique contribution to the profit and cash conversion cycle equations? For example, does the VP of marketing understand how their return on ad spend connects to the company's contribution margin, which connects to the bottom line, which connects to cash flow? Does the VP of operations understand how his or her purchasing decisions connect to inventory days, which drives changes in the cash conversion cycle? So when every person in the business is required to improve profit and cash flow and everyone knows the levers that they each are responsible for, staffing actually can drive growth and improvements in financial performance. So that's how I think about it.
Wow, you definitely take a much more holistic view. Rox, what about yourself?
Yeah, it's very similar to what John just said. You're either revenue generating or you're managing expense. And you have to know where your team is in that, in that hierarchy. It's really not that, it's not any more complicated than that. So I'm a back end credit and closing. We're revenue generating, or we assist revenue generation, but we're also an expense. And so it's really understanding our efficiency as a team and leveraging technology tools. It's the same thing for you.
Thank you so much, Rox. So I've heard from women business owners actually recently at an event that when they had additional cash in the past few years, maybe specifically from PPP, and also being concerned about supply chain disruptions, they stocked up on inventory to ensure they could continue to run normally. I think normal should be put in quotes, but now we're starting to see a kind of shift in consumer spending habits, and they're still carrying high amounts of inventory. And I think inventory management is going to be critical when it comes to cash flow regardless. But for these business owners in that instance, what is a safe way to unwind inventory? And I'd love to start with you on this, John.
So yeah, I'm seeing this problem across the board with many of the brands that I work with. One of the first things that one of the most frequent strategies that I work on is carefully crafting promotions so they don't tarnish your brand reputation, i.e. you become known as a brand that always discounts, and therefore customers are always waiting for your next sale before they buy. And some of the ways that I'm seeing that being done successfully, offering discounts via bundles or multi-unit purchase discounts. So that's perceived more as like a package value as opposed to a deep discount perception. And then another thing is using kind of secondary or alternate sales channels to run a short duration flash sale. So like example, an Amazon deal of the day, you're offering a sale just for the day on a channel that's not your normal go-to sales channel that tends to not tarnish the brand. Another thing is just having a simple inventory health scorecard where you actually are tracking days inventory by SKU. Just that awareness, you'd be surprised how that'll just change behavior and planning decisions. Just being aware of which SKUs are driving your unhealthy inventory days on hand. And then by far, and this is a part of our normal playbook at Free to Grow CFO, we implement these weekly cross-functional planning meetings where we have representatives from sales and marketing, ops, and finance all in the room once a week for a 45-minute call where they compare month-to-date sales actuals versus forecasts, month-to-date marketing spend versus forecast, and then the supply team is basically walks through their supply plan. And just those teams being aware of what they're each doing really helps balance supply and demand. And then the other thing is be thoughtful about how many SKUs you carry. I see a lot of brands carry way too many SKUs, and that gets them into this trouble.
Great. Thank you, John. Rox, any tips from you on how to unwind inventory or inventory management in general?
Yeah, I don't usually, as a lender, I'm not usually asking or solving for that, but I am going to ask you about that. So if we see elevated days inventory, or we see them growing, the days inventory increasing year over year, it's going to be a question we're going to ask, and we're going to want to know what your strategy is, and more importantly, how you're managing it.
Great. Thank you, Rox. And what about you, Melanie?
I've actually seen this directly impact my clients. During supply chain, they went out very aggressively to try to order as much, goods or raw material for their end product. And with the slowdown, or they were also purchasing at a very high cost. So now that value is shifting, so they don't have the liquidity or the cash they were typically using. So does that inventory become stale? Is it related to software or any, we see a lifespan of certain inventory that's rather short versus a long period of time? To be very mindful. I also ask, when they're purchasing their inventory, do you just purchase or focus on just one vendor? That could be an issue. You have a high concentration. So maybe you need to search and look at other sources to purchase that inventory. So you're not just limited to that one vendor for purchase of what your needs are. And I think also knowing your price cost too. When you purchase that inventory, 12 months ago, 6 months ago, what is the true value today and what is your purchasing power today?
Yeah. Okay, well, shifting gears, John already mentioned this, accounts receivable is hugely important to our cash conversion cycle. What are the best practices for maintaining fast AR turn times? And maybe what are best practices for correcting slow paying customers? And John, I'd like to start with you on this.
So from my experience, increasing AR turns is literally 80% about your front end credit check and invoicing process. And if you nail those, a lot of the typical collections work, it just disappears. And so during your sales cycle, when you're vetting a new prospect, do you have a credit check, a corporate credit check that's a part of that process? And are you setting credit limits accordingly? And then the invoicing process, honestly, I see tons of issues with invoicing before contractual obligations are actually fulfilled, invoices being delivered to the wrong person in the wrong format, invoices that are inaccurate. So cleaning that process up. If you nail down the credit check and that invoicing process, really the slow paying customers, you'll still always have those problem customers, but a lot of that will disappear. Another thing I suggest is not offering paper checks as a payment method. Take away the opportunity to play the classic, the check is in the mail game and accept only electronic payments. I mean, to the extent you can, automate payments through recurring ACH or credit card charges. I'm talking with a bunch of bankers, so you guys all know, offer that as treasury management services. Like, do it. Just take checks off the table.
Thank you, John. And Rox, you made me crack up as you were giggling too. But what are your thoughts on AR and turn times?
Yeah, I mean, the comment about billing is a big deal. And I think John touched on this, and we've talked a little bit about days inventory, but if you're a service business, you need to be really clear about what your deliverables are and when they're going to be billed. And that's it's a little bit different than managing physical inventory, but having a good work in progress, way that you're looking at each project that you're delivering on, and knowing what percentage of work has been completed versus what has been billed, and understanding that match is key for service businesses. And often when I'm struggling with making a credit decision, it's often because we have service businesses that have no clue what their work in progress schedule looks like.
Yeah. Thank you, Rox, for sharing that from your perspective. And Melanie, I'm sure for you, this is one of those big client conversations you probably have regularly.
It is. And again, really complimenting John and Rox on their focus and where their tips are. And, I think it's the same thing. You set an expectation with your client and your buyer, whether it's a good and a service. And the most important thing you can do, what you have control over, is how you execute and how you perform. Even if you're service-based or you're goods-based, make sure that you're fulfilling your obligation to that agreement with your buyer or your client, and hold them accountable. It's about that relationship. You don't want to become the bank that we call them. You're not holding on and not being paid. You've provided the goods. You've done the service. We've even seen clients now, if they're for service work, they are maybe getting a deposit up front or partial. So they negotiate some of those payment terms as well. Again, I like the electronic portion. Take the check out of it, get more speed of that turn from receivable to cash. Maybe you're taking a little bit of a discount because you're allowing them to pay with a credit card, but you're getting those monies in your account that next day. But I really think what it goes back down to is knowing who your cut client is, making sure you fulfill your obligation if it's a good or a service, and you got to pick up the phone and hey, you owe me some money.
Thank you. And I love that comment on communication. It seems simple, but it's so important. So I'm going to take a slight turn off our optimistic approach, but we've seen so many businesses go through this right now or previously. What are some of those key signs to look for that would indicate cash is running out or your cash conversion cycle is just not operating efficiently? And in those moments, what are some important things to think about when deciding whether to keep doing what you're doing and just hoping you're going to ride this out? Or do you do a business model pivot? Rox, I'd love to start with you on this.
Oh, this is a good one. Well, I'll talk towards how do you know your business is running out of cash? And I can only do that by a story. Looking at a manufacturer recently, and this was a pretty large company. And I was looking at their accounts receivable, and over 50% of their accounts were more than 90 days past due. Then I look at their payables, and over 50% of their payables are over 90 days past due. And then I look at their cash, and they have a really small amount of cash compared to they have their receivables more than 10 times their actual cash. This is a sign, and they maxed out their line of credit, and their debt to worth is 22-1. So this is a highly leveraged company that has almost no cash liquidity. And they're stretching out their vendors now to deal with the fact that they're not collecting on their receivables. And to me, and the interesting thing is they're asking us for financing to solve that problem. But what is not clear is that they don't even know that there's this bigger problem right here. And, that's why we're here today, to talk to you about these important things. But that's an example of how do you know when you're almost out of cash.
Thank you, Rox, for sharing that. Yeah, no, I think that's really helpful. Melanie, what about you? When you've worked with clients, I'm sure this has not been an unusual situation.
After 22 years in commercial lending, we've heard many situations. We've been through different economic downturns or situations that neither one of us could have prepared for. And I think with a driving factor in the common, when we get to a client who's in a really tight cash position or realizing some declining trends, you have to go with that gut feeling. Are you sleeping at night? What's your anxiety level? Have you really taken a step back to look at your books? And if you aren't as savvy with your own financials, make sure you have a key person who is the expert when it comes to your financials. They're a little bit more removed emotionally. I think business owners, we have a very emotional connection to our business. And when you can have someone come in who can look at it, subjectively and not in the trenches with you, there's a lot of little maneuvers, that cash conversion cycle. What is your true cash position? Our margins, do you need to make some adjustments to your pricing and to your costs? I mean, you've got to be able to look at that and be able to be quick to react, because you can turn things around in a relatively reasonable time. But I think, for me, when I talk to business owners, they know it's that gut feeling. Man, I'm not feeling good. Payroll's getting a little tight. My payables are getting longer to pay. My cash position's dwindling down. So you have to be very honest with yourself.
Yeah, no, thank you, Melanie. And I think you called out something really important. Not every business owner is going to be directly running, all their financials. And so I think having that important person to trust to kind of gut, this is my gut check. Tell me what's really happening. I think is critical. So thank you for sharing that. And John, you are that technically person that comes in with the unemotional expertise. But what have you done with clients when, they're in that position and they're kind of trying to decide what does the future hold?
So before deciding to pivot, I explore the profitability and cash conversion cycle. And I first ask, hey guys, are we seeing detrimental trends here because of poor management of these drivers? And I really zero in on that first before deciding the business model is dead and we need to pivot. I have a client I just went through this with very recently. We were looking at their cash conversion cycle. They were losing a little bit of money profitability wise, and their inventory days were way too high. So we started digging into the two of those things, and we go, okay, we've got some very irresponsible marketing spend that's driving most of our margin decrease. We cleaned that up. The business was able to generate a little bit of profit. Then we started digging into inventory days, and the CEO was like, you know what? 60% of our inventory valuation is product that doesn't even sell, and it never has. So we're just going to discontinue this and we're going to liquidate it. We'll even sell it at cost or below cost just to get any cash out of it we can, because we're not going to replenish the coffers on this. And he started that constraint of realizing he couldn't just launch any product he wanted to, got him thinking, what if we start launching some digital products that have no hard product cost? And how did we make this decision? our 3-statement financial model. We have a balance sheet, P&L cash flow statement projected 24 months in the future. And we started modeling out, what if we were a digital only company? What if we were a digital plus smaller product line company? And from looking at that, we could see, hey, the path forward is actually a hybrid. We're going to use the 80-20 rule and scrap the 80% of products that don't sell. And we're going to free up that capital and we're going to invest it in this new line of business that we're going to run alongside the hard good business, which is digital products that have no physical cost of goods sold.
Wow, that's quite the impressive pivot. So thank you for sharing, John. So let's get out of thinking negatively and get onto an optimistic point of view. We've got businesses where the cash flow conversion cycle is strong. What are the key things to consider when a business wants to expand, whether it be footprint, product set, or even clientele? John, I'd love to hear from you first.
So there's a number of ways to take this, but as I was thinking through this, really, if I could zero in on one area, it's that you shouldn't expand until you have clear signs that you're beginning to approach the ceiling of the niche that you're currently playing in. So niche being sales channel, the products and services you offer in your target market. If you're not hitting that ceiling, if you still have tons of room left to go before hitting that ceiling, you should keep expanding within it, because every time you expand your footprint or your product service catalog or your clientele, you add complexity to the business, which tends to drive more overhead and more opportunities for suboptimal cash conversion cycles. So like an example is more products, that's the more likelihood of increasing inventory days because you have a new minimum inventory level for every one of those SKUs that you launch. And you also have the risk of being wrong on the new product sales forecast and getting stuck with a bunch of inventory. Another example is, hey, more clients. Well, that's more accounts to chase down to maintain optimal AR days. So I always like to ask with new product and service launches, how will this launch increase repeat purchases and ultimately increase lifetime value of my existing customers? Because I've already paid to acquire that customer, right? So if I can figure out ways to launch new products to sell into that customer again and again and again, my margins are going to go up because I'm not having to reacquire them. A great example is at Guardian Bikes. We first offered a 16, 20, 24-inch bike. The next one we offered was 26 because we could now have someone who bought a 16 and go all the way to 26. And after that, we said, hey, how about a balance bike so that we can capture that new customer even earlier? Now we can ride with them from balance bike all the way to 26. Eventually, Guardian will launch adult bikes, again, increasing lifetime value of the same customer that we've already acquired, which drives up margins.
Yeah. Thank you, John, for sharing that. Rox, what have you seen when a business thinks they're ready to expand and what works and doesn't work?
Yeah, I think one of the things, and as a lender and an SBA lender particularly, this is sort of where an SBA loan can be really great, because a working capital loan with the SBA guarantee, we can typically double the term that we could lend on a term loan conventionally. So we can do a 10-year versus a 5-year. So when you're taking that leap, because you don't grow straight line, when you're ready to make that expansion, it's really first starts with not only what, where, and how. It's, can you afford to do it, and how much cash are you going to have to invest in upfront? So if you come and you say, here's our plan to take this next big leap, and here's how much we're going to have to invest in today, having a 10-year term to pay for that initial investment is really a great tool. Now, of course, how much you can borrow is a little bit bigger function versus going out and raising capital for that expansion, right? I think it depends on the scale of your business, whether you borrow or whether you raise equity, or whether you do a little bit of both, like I did with John at Guardian.
Love it. And Melanie, I'm sure you've had clients go through this. What can you share?
Yeah, I think great points both Rox and John have stated. Growing and expanding doesn't always mean it's a positive to the bottom line. So we've always heard the old saying, you can grow broke. That's very true. And so you've got to be very, very intentional and really strategic. And that starts with sitting down with your consultant, sitting down with your team, making sure, does this make sense? I had a really phenomenal story of a client. They've been in business for 30 years, really doing great, corner of the market, providing services here in New Mexico. And during COVID, they had already started a growth plan to expand and double their locations. And we all thought, this is not going to work. There's no way, it can't happen. They were so methodical. And what I believe the pandemic taught them was to really look at every single expense and line item. Was location one, was that profitable? Was that self-sufficient? Because we don't want to open second, third, fourth location and to be dependent and bleed that other, the first location. So, looking at where they already had systems in place, can they mirror those? Do they need to have a chief operations manager to cover all locations instead of having duplication of management? So, I can tell you it's been awesome to watch them, to see their numbers come through. They survived through the pandemic. We're about to open another 2 more locations for them. And I can tell you their numbers and their bottom line are more healthy than we've ever seen in the last 30 years of business. But it was very strategic. And so I challenge you as a business owner to understand that growth and high revenue does not always result in higher profit margins.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Melanie. I think that was very valuable. We're going to get ready to transition to live Q&A after one more question. So I've seen a few questions come through, but please keep submitting them. Final question, and this is one we've gotten time and time again. What tools are out there to create your P&L, your balance sheet, any sort of cash flow management tools? I wanted to start with you on this, John. I think we probably have business owners all the way from beginner to advanced when it comes to their financials. What is out there? What should they be using? And for you specifically, when should they consider maybe bringing in a fractional CFO or a full-time CFO?
Yeah, so still the favorite out there is QuickBooks Online and Excel. I will give you some other options that I've seen out there. For forecasting, Excel is largely the favorite, but there's some other more intermediate and advanced tools like Fathom and Causal and Model Optics, but they usually take a financial professional to use. It's hard self-service. They're not really made self-service for founders. For financial statement analysis and KPI dashboards, my favorite is Reach Reporting. We use this with all of our clients. We can build really nice, slick looking graphs and visualizations that help owners see trends of their financials, not just numbers on a spreadsheet. That's really, really important. When it comes to hiring fractional or full-time CFO, some signs that it might be time for a CFO in general. One, you no longer have your finger on the pulse of all the key numbers in the business. You used to know them all, but you've expanded enough that you don't know them anymore. Your profit no longer equals your cash flow. So you're having a hard time understanding why there isn't more or less cash in the bank based on the P&L that you're looking at. Or you go to try to build out your own forecast and it's really hard because the business has become so complex. Cash doesn't equal profit. You're not even sure how to build out a forecast anymore. I tend to see CPG brands need a CFO around 4 to 5 million in sales, and service businesses around 2 to 3 million in sales. With fractional versus full-time, if you have a solid bookkeeper or in-house accountant, a good fractional CFO can scale with your business for CPG brand up to like 20 to 30 million. Although I do have one client that's doing 60. And the reason we can service them is because they have a really strong in-house controller and they don't need a full-time CFO yet. With a service business, a fractional CFO can probably scale up to 10 to 15 million in revenue in my experience. And then after that, you're going to probably want someone full-time.
Great. Thank you, John. So I'm going to shift to some of the questions we've been getting, and there's lots of good ones. So be ready. We try to be as rapid fire so we can get to as many of these as possible. I think, John, let's start with you on this one. I'm a service business. So if we're thinking about the cash conversion cycle, is inventory for them payroll, or how should they be looking at the cash conversion cycle?
Yeah, you think about the timing of when you pay for your service costs, whether you subcontract them or they're in-house. So yeah, that's the timing of when you pay for your labor replaces the inventory part of the equation.
Great. Anything either of you want to add, Rox or Melanie?
No, that's important. It's the question that I'm going to ask too for service businesses. How often do you pay your employees?
Yeah. Okay, shifting on. How can cash flow forecasting help save some small businesses from failure? I think this is an easy one, but any one of you want to jump in on this?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Melanie.
I think it's crucial at any stage of your business, whether you consider yourself small to large, medium size. This is going to be a very important factor of your business and to maintain a longevity and to keep your doors open. So, the sooner you can wrap your arms around it, whether you're leveraging, professionals who can assist you, guide you, who can, come in and be that expert, even your banker, either systems and services that we can help to convert that cash flow cycle. But I think at every stage and every size of business, it's important.
And I'll just add really quick, rule number one of forecasting, your forecast is always wrong. It's not about nailing it perfectly. It's about the exercise of actually taking the time to go, what does cause cash to increase and decrease, and the timing of it. That exercise will cause you to make better decisions, which will keep you from running into trouble.
Great comment, John. Okay. How do you manage your cash conversion cycle when your payment comes in 60 to 90 days payment terms, but there's still demand for supply of products?
So the question is, you have to pay your vendor before you collect from your customer. Is that the question?
Yeah, essentially, yes.
Okay. Yeah. No, this is the fundamental reason why you do this exercise. Because you have to either, when you identify that gap, and if you multiply it by every dollar that you sell with that deficiency, that is a cash deficit that you have to fill. And there's two ways you fill it: debt or equity, whether it's money out of your own pocket or whether it's an investor, a third-party investor. Those are the only two ways to go. And I really do think when we talk about companies scaling, this is actually one of the fundamental challenges when someone says, I want to grow my company and I need working capital. That gap is obvious to me, but it's not obvious to you, right?
What I would comment on that too is, go back to your vendors. Make sure if you have a long-term relationship and you're paying as agreed, let them know we're in a growth strategy. It's taking me X days to manufacture, put my product together, my end product. Can we negotiate some terms on the payable, on how I'm paying you? As long as you've got to be very open. You have to be and have integrity and pay your bills and be a good performer to your vendor as well on your payables. But you might have a little bit of flexibility with that.
Yeah. And if the business is profitable, go to your bank and ask them for an accounts receivable line of credit. There's so many options out there to finance accounts receivable. And it's one of the key working capital financing products that I use all the time with clients day in and day out.
And the factoring, someone had mentioned factoring in the chat. And a line of credit is probably your cheapest way to go. Factoring is more expensive and you lose control. So I would say that, that would probably be, and it depends on the industry, because there's some industries where factoring is very common, but the first place you want to go is your bank to see about getting a line of credit or increasing your line of credit. If you're growing, if your revenues are growing, this is a great sign that you probably need a bigger line of credit.
Great. Rox, this one's a slam dunk for you. Where do we go for SBA loans?
Oh, you can come to Bank of the West. Yes, we have especially SBA lending business. You can reach out, if you're an existing customer, you can reach out to your relationship manager and they will introduce you to one of our SBA business development specialists, and they'll help you put your application together. If you're really needing small dollars, we do offer an SBA Express loan. It's a counteroffer to a conventional small loan product through our Small Business Express lending platform. So you've got two ways to get there.
Great. Thanks, Rox. And I would also say there was kind of a question of on very early stage. I would add, if you're maybe even too early for SBA, another option is always to go check out a local CDFI, which is a community development financial institution. They'll start off, they'll be looking a little bit more at your personal history, but don't let that be concerning for you. They really want to work with you to help you grow a business. So they typically offer a lot of counseling and helping you getting there. So you may start with something very small. I've seen as small as $1,600 out of a CDFI, but they'll help you build your credit until you're ready to come to a bank. So those are definitely options. Okay, another question. We are a service-based business and we have a very large corporate client who insists on a net 60 payment terms, which is very challenging as a small business. How much should we be pushing back on these terms without losing the client?
I think I would start with, have you gone to your bank and, told your story to see if there's a way you could fill that gap? The question is this a large client that is going to be with you for a long time versus a client that it's a big project, but it's not a repeat customer that's going to continue to demand those terms. I don't know if John or Melanie have something to add there.
I was going to say, honestly, you got to think about the competitive dynamics in the market that you compete in, because if your competition is standard to offer net 60-day payment terms, and this customer of yours has a lot of leverage to just move the business to one of your competitors if they'll match or beat your credit terms, you probably are going to need to align your payment terms with the market. And like Roxanne said, that's where you go to your bank to leverage the contract and the receivables you have to close that cash gap. If you have a little bit more dominance in the market, then you might be able to command better payment terms. But at the end of the day, if competition is going to undercut you, it can be challenging.
Awesome. Melanie, anything you want to add on that one?
I think it goes back to really knowing your client and developing that relationship. I think that is volumes for your business, especially in a service-based industry. Do you have regular communication? Do you have fair expectations both ways? It's a mutual relationship. And again, knowing what your competition is offering. If it is truly 60 days, then you don't want to, beat yourself out of it. So again, working with your local banks, your financial relationship is going to be crucial in these types of situations.
Great. Melanie, I wanted to give this one to you because I know you work heavily with our wealth partners, but as a business owner, how do I leverage my business to grow my personal wealth?
It's a tough thing. And I know as an entrepreneur myself, sometimes the last person that gets paid is yourself as a business owner. So I think you want to be very strategic and have those initial conversations and going through, again, those exercises of, where do I want to see and be in the next year, 5 years? And it's unfortunate because a lot of our small business owners, they don't put aside and start investing back into their retirement or investing into their own personal assets. And that's a strength. So when we look at a global picture of our clients, our business clients, we also look at their net worth individually outside of the business. What kind of strengths do they carry? Have they been disciplined in paying and saving for themselves? It's going to tell a lot about the character of how they're running their business. I think that's the first thing. We don't want this to be a glorified hobby where everybody gets paid first. And I know as business owners, we sometimes, and I very well can speak to it, where we compromise and sacrifice for ourselves, for our employees, or for better technology, or for equipment, whatever that may be. But you really have to think strategically and put your wealth and your savings is as much as a priority as the business.
Great. Thank you. Rox, you have something to add?
Yeah, I actually want to say something because, this is my big thing is always pay yourself. When you're doing your forecast yourself in that forecast. The other thing I'll tell you is that there are times when you have a really great year. And I have seen, and particularly with all the stimulus money that came in the door, people who got pretty significant amounts of stimulus in their business, and they had this cash windfall, and the cash left the business, but they don't have it personally. And so they didn't provide any liquidity. If you keep liquidity in your business or you keep it personally, it doesn't matter as long as you have some liquidity, because there will come a day when you may need to reach in your own back pocket and reinvest some of your your distributions back into your company.
And one thing I'll add to this, I highly recommend anyone who's interested in this topic to read a book called Profit First. It's about putting your profit and your pay aside first and figuring out how to structure the business around that. And it gives you a methodology for how to do the things that Melanie and Rox are talking about. And it was hugely formative for me and the way that I run my business.
Thank you, John, for sharing that. This is a great one for you before we wrap up. What does one look for when hiring a CFO?
So I think what I will say on this topic or on this question is that a lot of people there's a spectrum of what people think a CFO is. A lot of people think a CFO is an accountant. Was I originally an accountant? Yes, I was, but not all CFOs were. And you don't have to have been an accountant to be a CFO. A CFO specifically, the way I like to separate accountants from CFOs, accountants deal with the past, recording the past. CFOs help you decide what to do in the future. And so you want a CFO who understands how to project future, who knows how to model decisions and strategies that you are thinking about wanting to engage in. And you want someone who really understands cost of capital. What is the cost of equity? What is the cost of debt? What is the cost of your retained earnings? And someone who understands strategy. You ultimately want a strategist at the table with you who can help you formulate strategy and make decisions and back them up with numbers, not just a number cruncher who says, here's all the numbers, figure it out yourself.
Great. Thank you, John. And just one quick, what was the name of that book again? We had someone who was asking.
Profit First.
Thank you. Okay, well, we are going to wrap this up. Melanie, Roxanne, and John, you've been amazing, but I do want to ask you all to share, what is that one key piece of advice you want everyone to walk away with today? And Melanie, I will start with you.
I think what's important as a business owner and as you're looking at this cash flow model, you don't know what you don't know. And so don't be afraid to ask those questions. I think circle yourself around experts, find a mentor, find a coach, maybe someone that's not necessarily in your region, someone that you can reach out and bounce ideas, because I think you've got to be growing and understanding, and you need to be the expert in what you do and you provide. And have that circle of other experts around you that you can, leverage and lean on.
Thank you, Melanie. Rox, I know I constrained you to one, but I can see you're probably going to have two or three.
Well, my standard is pay yourself always. Put yourself in your forecast. But I think the thing, if I was talking to especially younger businesses, I am always surprised how many businesses who've been in business for 2 to 5 years do not create a balance sheet. And it's like running your business with half your tools. That's really critical. And if you don't understand that part of accounting, like John said, QuickBooks has gotten better and better and better over the years in helping you, create a balance sheet. I think the other thing is that, there's no shame here. Go out and, leverage, contacts, do your own research, phone a friend, another business owner, maybe has a good help. But I do find that is probably, especially in the small dollars, and what I'm talking about are like, under $500,000 working capital requests or $350,000. No balance sheet is really hard to make a working capital loan.
Thank you, Rox. And John.
So my piece of advice would be create a plan and don't pour over making a plan that's perfect. You will benefit from the act of planning. Set it until it's 60 to 70% as your best, and then go execute, and then come back and revisit that plan and ask yourself what you learned and tweak it, and just keep doing that over and over again. And you're going to find yourself making much better decisions and building a much healthier business.
Thank you, John. And I would just say, again, it's Women's History Month. We've got a ton of women entrepreneurs on the phone. Take a moment to celebrate what you've accomplished. As Melanie made the comment, you don't know what you don't know, but you guys have done a lot to get where you are today, to be on here, to be investing in yourself, to learn more about finances. So, celebrate yourself, and, the future is always looking brighter. So with that, Michelle, I will turn it back to you.
That was amazing. Thank you so, so much, Melanie, Roxanne, John, and Paloma. Thank you for taking the time to speak to our community, share these insights, and set just such an incredible overview on behalf of the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center and everyone in attendance today. We are sincerely grateful.
Thank you.
And to our audience, we would love for you to join us for our upcoming webinars. You can view them by using the link posted in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to welcoming you back online with us soon.